Welcome to Do More with Your Money. I am your host, TJ Van Gerven. On today's podcast episode, I am joined by Leland Gross of PeaceLink Financial Planning. Leland specializes in helping realtors and self employed millennials get the life they want from their business. Leland, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your expertise.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. So, one of the first things I always want to start with is just understanding a little bit of how you got to where you're at today, the why behind you started PeaceLink, and just learning more about yourself.
Never thought I would work in finance. I was pretty bad at math in high school and found it a boring topic. So, in college, I actually studied international relations, was excited about a career path in that world. But after college, did a really brief internship in international relations, and it was a lot of just sitting at a desk, reading reports, consolidating reports all day long. And the lifestyle of it really was quite boring. So I started rethinking that, had met some financial advisors, and got to see just how impactful their career could be on the people they got to serve, while also providing a lifestyle where they could be flexible, provide for their family, both financially, but also could be the coaches of their kids' sports and home for dinner and involved in their community. And those are things that are really important to me. So, kind of just took a right turn and got a job in a large insurance company and broker dealer where I was predominantly selling financial products to people. In some ways, under the guise of financial advice, there was advice happening, but it was definitely more transaction based. Like I was comped on transaction stuff. And over time, that just wore on me. I got my CFP, 5 or 6 years ago, and really fell in love with helping people kind of tie all areas of their finances together and seeing how those work off of each other, and realized like I've been selling people like really cars with really great engines, but no wheels. Like I was really just focused on one part of the picture, which was the insurance and investments, and not looking at the whole vehicle itself. So I started trying to do comprehensive planning and just realized the firm that I was at was not a great fit. It was kind of a square peg in a round hole situation. And that's sort of when the pandemic hit. And I found myself with lots of time at home and was still working, but had a lot of extra time on my hands where I got to research, what else is out there? How else could I be doing this? There's got to be a way to help someone comprehensively in their finances. And that's kind of what led me to launch PeaceLink Financial Planning about 3 years ago.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a very familiar story. I've heard from others and I've seen that myself. And I just want to touch on it real quick and I don't want to get into the whole fee compensation and things like that. But, why is it important that, when you're working with a financial advice professional that like you're paying for advice and not necessarily a product? Because I see a lot of people on LinkedIn selling financial products and they tend to get upset with some of the posts I have. And I'd like to just hear from your perspective, like why is it so important to separate the product from the advice?
Yeah, I think about the analogy of a doctor, right? And we could go into all the politics around health insurance now. It pays doctors. But when you go to a doctor, let's say you go because you've got lower back pain. And let's say there's two prescriptions on the market, one for your specific type of lower back pain, or one just for generalized back pain. Well, if your doctor gets paid differently depending on the prescription, maybe they get a commission for the general back pain medicine. And so they're going to give you that. You came in with lower back pain, you got back pain medicine. You are none the wiser that there's a better solution for you, and the doctor just got paid. And that's why, in general, doctors get paid separately. We pay the doctor for their expertise and advice, for them to represent us and say, this is the best way to treat you. And then we pay for our prescription separately. It's the same thing. I actually this morning was at a financial planning association breakfast, and someone was like, how do you make money if you don't sell products? I was like, well, people will pay for just great quality advice, just like an attorney. You're not paying them for the will, you're paying them for their expertise and their hours. An accountant, you don't get a commission based off how big your tax return refund is. And they were like, but that means you have to always provide value. Like every year you gotta like provide value to your clients? I'm like, yes, because that's what they pay for. And so there's just this disconnect, I think, and again, we don't need to go into the fee thing, but when someone's paid for the product they sell, but they're selling you on their expertise and advice, you have a conflict of interest. And to
Yeah.
be paid just for the advice does away, for the most part, with that conflict. There's always going to be some sort of conflict when money's exchanging hands, but it drastically reduces it, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think that's very well said. And I like to just, go back to that question once in a while because it's easy for people to forget that. And in the world of, financial advisors, like that title is just thrown around so much and it could mean so many different things. So I appreciate you breaking that down. So talk to me a little bit about how you got to working with, small businesses and in particular realtors, which I think is an interesting niche.
Yeah, a lot of advisors are like, why would you work with realtors? They want to invest in real estate. Um, I would say it was pretty organic. Like I, went through all the business coaching of creating your ideal client avatar. And I sort of started PeaceLink just saying, self-employed millennial families, because that's what I was. I was a self-employed millennial family. And so the idea of having, infinite desires, like we want to save for our kids' college and retirement, but we want to travel and we want to buy a bigger house and we're hitting all these life milestones along the way, like infinite wants and finite resources. We're still in the building years. I really like that, puzzle piece to come together of how do we do that. And naturally, it sort of just led to more and more business owners because it's a lot of, establishing LLCs, a lot of tax planning, a lot of, you don't have a benefits plan, you don't have a 401k and health insurance. So we need to kind of create that for you. Um, and so I've sort of found my way there because it was a little bit just where I was in my stage of life. And then the realtor thing really happened organically. I had kind of one realtor come through my door, and all the services I was offering to self employed professionals translates because they're all 1099 self employed
Right.
professionals, whether they realize it or not. A lot of realtors view themselves as employees who just have to pay their own taxes. All of them are technically subject to self employment tax, Schedule C's, things like that. And so it just sort of happened. One came through, they were like, that was really valuable. They sent another, and it sort of just snowballed. And I'm just sort of trusting the process and saying, great, we're falling into a deeper level of a niche. So I would say I started
Yeah.
off kind of with a niche, like millennials. Like we're not doing retiree, Medicare, IRMA work, but you know,
Right.
we're kind of shifting down even deeper as more and more clients are coming in with similar needs.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Sometimes the niche finds you, and I can understand how realtors would be a great place to add value because, like you said, they don't always realize that they are small business owners, and or self-employed, even really to if more obviously. But when you are self-employed or small business owner, like you said, everything is on you to figure out as far as it goes to tax planning, your long-term retirement planning, insurance coverage, right? You're not getting the same level of benefits
Mhm.
that you would be maybe in a traditional W-2 role. So talk to me a little bit
And from
specifically sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but even from a fee perspective, like not charging on assets under management, a lot of these people I would consider are Henrys, like high earners, not rich yet. So they're making great cash flow, but they haven't built $1 million portfolio. And we're consulting so much on their business side that we can actually take our flat fee and bill it through their business. And it's a professional fee. And so, in some ways, even just the fee only model worked well because, they might want to invest in real estate, but because I'm not paid on insurance or mutual funds, great. Let's talk about it. Like, let's build that into your plan because it's
Yeah.
comprehensive. So it just sort of felt like there were a few things that also kept coming into play, even just naturally in the structure of, not being paid on just products, financial
Assets
products. So
or
because we had
products, yeah.
talked about that, I wanted to throw it in.
No, I think that's great, and we're very aligned on that because I, also work millennial demographic, a lot of times equity comp, and sometimes they might have like illiquid positions in a private company, right? And they don't, but they have the cash
Mhm.
flow to pay for advice. And so they may not be served in that traditional model or definitely not a product type model. So we're very aligned on that. And I think that's great. So I guess, so let's say you do have, realtor, client coming on board. What does that look like? What are some of the things that you're finding like areas to improve? You mentioned LLCs and understanding that. I see a lot of misinformation there. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think in the closely held business space, we could talk about, big corporations, huge offices, but I work in the really like solopreneur, small teams world. A lot of times their accounting is a mess. Like they don't really know what income they're making and spending. They don't know how to pay themselves. They've been told to just file as an S corp, having no idea what that means because someone on TikTok told them to do that. Like you said, there's so much misinformation. And so I think the first thing we do is sit down and just take an inventory of like, you know, what was your revenue, what were your business expenses, how are you structured, what do we have in place? And I think cleaning up the business side is first. Like if you think about, and this might be a little technical, but from like a tax perspective, you got to fill out the business tax returns first to then flow it to the personal, because that's going to dictate their income, different things like that. And so we really start off there and say, like, how do we get this cleaned up? Is it we need to establish an LLC? Is it you need an operating agreement? Is it, how you're filing your taxes or cleaning up your P&L, putting systems in place there? Because from there, now we have all the information. Now we have all the cards on the table that we can say, how do we take this business that's your biggest investment, your biggest asset, and flow it efficiently to your personal life through efficiently paying you, through efficiently structuring it to keep as much money in your pocket. And then from there, we can, save for college, save for retirement, save for, early retirement, work optional, whatever you want your goals to be. But I really think in that closely held business space, so many people are great at what they do, like the trade they're doing, selling real estate or whatever the business is. And the business side is just total chaos. And I think most people in this world are afraid that they're going to screw up their taxes and a team of men in black suits are going to show up at their house and they're going to end up under a bridge eaten by a lion or something. So I think they're really afraid of the business side. And so kind of just partnering with them in that, providing a peace of mind and just saying, here's the steps, here's what we're going to do, really provides a lot of value.
No, absolutely. That sounds like a tremendous value. And I would say, how do you balance with somebody who, is self-employed small business owner with them reinvesting in their business versus taking kind of like that profit first mentality? What is your approach there?
It's a great question. I think it depends on the business, the stage of the business, and the person's personal goals. We have clients who, it's going to take a few years for their business to get up and running. And so we're kind of walking this balance of we have to pay you enough for you to get by. Like you need food on your table, you need a roof over your head, but maybe we're, pushing off the bigger goals so that we can take as much cash as possible to put back into your business and make strategic investments to really grow that. Others, in real estate specifically, there's a piece of it that's like, well, it's a service business. You don't need a ton of inventory. You're probably not going to have a ton of employees other than maybe an assistant. And so we are able to distribute a fair amount of their revenue to themselves because it's not a high, like, there's not a ton of investing you're going to be putting back into it other than marketing. And there's some good guidelines of like, the 10% rule for marketing. Um, and so I think I probably
Reinvesting
lean
in.
towards, yeah. So I feel like I probably lean towards the profit first mentality. I am a little bent that way, especially in service
Yeah.
businesses that don't have a huge overhead. Um, because psychologically, it allows us to enjoy our business a little bit more, which prevents burnout and causes a higher level of like sustainable success in a business. But
Yeah.
if you are in a business where we need to be making investments over the next few years, we'll do that too. It just feels like it's so dependent on the person's industry and goals. But for real
No,
estate, I lean
absolutely.
towards first.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'll be interested to hear your opinion on this too. For realtors in particular, it strikes me as, um, an industry or career that can be cyclical, and there can be some, pretty big down times, down periods, especially I feel like maybe
Mhm.
recently it could have been a tough market. How do you go about weathering those economic storms, maybe creating more of a margin of safety in people's personal, balance sheets?
Welcome to the biggest planning issue I've had over the last like 2 years because real estate's been wild over the last 5 years, right? Like ridiculously low interest rates, ridiculously high house prices that created a surge in real estate, tons of people flooding that industry from a professional standpoint to interest rates skyrocket, quote unquote, like they're higher than they were before. And, now we have really high, buyers, low inventory, so very low sellers, and high interest rates. And so a lot of realtors are really hurting for business because there's so many of them and so little business to be had right now. And then you throw on that the big NAR lawsuit that just happened, challenging their commissions and some industry disruption. And a lot of them are hurting and thinking about getting out of the industry. And I would say I work with a lot of the like high performers. So not a lot of my clients are leaving. We all know the real estate person who is like a stay-at-home mom, which is great, who sells one or two houses a year. Like there's that world, and then there's the people who we sell millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate every year. The latter is kind of where I live, but it has shown a light on, hey, we need to make sure we're built for this. Like in this closely held business world, especially for realtors, they're not thinking long term. They're like feast or famine. Feast, they're like, great,
Right.
I'm buying a new car, I'm buying a new house, I'm taking a trip. And then famine hits and they're like, well, now I'm dying. And so we've had to, for a handful of clients, say, like, all right, how do we take a season of feast and prepare ourselves for a season of famine to stop the giant volatility that comes in your income? And that looks like building a bigger safety net in your business, not distributing as much, creating systems like in Profit First, you know, put aside
Right.
your profit and put aside your owner compensation. So pay yourself, but also leave money in the business so that when you're not getting sales, that's fine. I think all realtors are ready for the winter, like November to March, you're not going to sell as much. But when winter lasts for a year and a half, 2 years because of, economic cycles, they need to be ready for that. And it is not a recession proof business. It's very cyclical based on consumers. Do consumers have money in their pocket? Are they willing to spend? They'll probably buy a house. Are they not? Is it tight? They're probably not going to, they're going to batten down the hatches. So that is a big planning piece for people is, we're not in 2021 anymore where, you know, you could sell 10 houses at $100,000 over asking price with, someone giving their left kidney to get in there as well. Like it was a
Yeah.
ridiculous market. And the
No,
last thing I'll say,
absolutely.
I heard this morning is with real estate specifically, it carries a lot of recency bias. So the bias that we only think the last few years. So even though interest rates are still relatively average when you look at historic interest rates, everyone's thinking about the 2 or 3 years that we had 3% interest, which is the lowest in all history. So from a consumer bias in the real estate world, it's very short minded. It's not like the stock market world where we're using 20-year averages all the time. It's totally like 3 to 5 year recency bias over and over again that you're kind of, from a financial psychology standpoint, working pretty much always dealing with.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And even a small increase in interest rates, since prices didn't really budge that much, the affordability goes down a ton. And yeah, you're right. People were
Mhm.
getting really comfortable with those 3%, 30-year fixed mortgages. Um,
Oh yeah, I don't want to move. I got 3%, and I'm good. I'm like, I'm going to be in this house for a while because
yeah, you're not
this is
leaving
really,
anytime soon.
you know.
Yeah. So you mentioned the feast and famine, and that makes a ton of sense. And I think it's good for anybody to kind of create habits that they carry with them, across different economic environments. But I could see for realtors how that would be even more important to have more of a buffer. And like you said, when things are going really well, right? They feel comfortable spending a lot, maybe making real estate purchases. And you mentioned that
Mhm,
I can imagine, a realtor, a real estate professional would be more comfortable or maybe biased towards investing in real estate. How do you approach with your
mhm.
clients the conversation of, having maybe liquid portfolio, stocks and bonds or stocks primarily versus, owning real estate?
Yeah, it's a good question because you're right. You know, I work in investing, and so stock market investments feel a little bit more comfortable to me. They work in real estate, so they understand, flipping short-term rentals, long-term rentals. That world is just so much more comfortable to them. Um, and they see, I think social media lends itself to real estate. There's like a million pages on like I bought 3 rental properties and now I'm a multimillionaire who never works. And so you kind of get this rose-colored glasses on it. Um, I do think real estate's a really great opportunity for people. I think it can produce great cash flow, passive income streams. Um, it's a solid, like steady increasing, you know, sector long term. But you mentioned it, liquidity is an issue. Like if you need this money, it's not as easy to get out of a house. If anything, it's going to take you probably 30 to 60 days, just even if you sell it pretty fast, just with closings. So we kind of walk through that. And I believe that all these tools, insurance, stocks, bonds, you know, Roth IRAs, retirement accounts, real estate, all have their place at the table, and it's just plugging and figuring out how are we going to use them and what's the goal. So we talk a lot about, having taxable brokerage accounts for liquidity purposes. Should they need the money? Should they want to invest in something else to be able to access it? We're using things like solo 401ks, SEP IRAs for their long-term retirement planning, retirement income purposes. And then a lot of them are investing in real estate to create additional income streams as part of their retirement picture, um, as well as just like kind of overall net worth building, just continuing to build assets. And so I just feel like it has to be held in balance. Any one of those by itself loses. So if you just are using your solo 401k, great, you're getting a great tax benefit, you're getting a great retirement benefit. It's not going to help you. That money will not help you before you're 59 and a half. If
Right.
you are in real estate, well, it's a pretty high risk that that's going to be a great property in 40 years when when you're retiring. And if you need the money now, it's tied up. But it can create a lot of great income streams. It can be a great asset to your portfolio. It has a lot of tax efficiencies to it. Taxable brokerage account, you got the liquidity, but you don't have the tax breaks. So there's a lot of kind of each of these tools has their pros and cons that have to be weighed against each other when we're creating a real like comprehensive plan that's actually in the best interest of the client.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we all have bias, right? But it's important to actually weigh those trade offs and quantify too. I just think people really underestimate the recurring costs of real estate. I mean, obviously, if you have an income component, it changes it into more of an investment. But especially for the primary residence, I mean, at least recently for
Oh
what
yeah.
I've been running for projections, it's just I don't know. I think in my experience, millennials are coming around to the idea of like, we want to enjoy our life now, not necessarily like work,
Mhm.
30 years to just stop at this arbitrary point in the future. And so, maybe instead of, thinking outside the box a little bit and actually using our resources today. Um, I mean, I'd love to hear your experience with work with clients. Are they trying to target kind of like that financial independence, retire early? Or are they more of the mindset coming around to like, let's live life today?
Somewhere in the middle, right? And I totally agree with you that our generation watched our parents and grandparents, you know, work really hard, lose out on friendship and experiences, and kind of sold their life to just their duties to hit 65, golf for 5 years, and then sit in a chair for the final 15 years of their life. And I think that's a narrative that we're all kind of afraid of for our own life. And so we do just generationally carry a higher weight on experiences now. And that puts itself in a lot of different ways. You've got the vagabond, like wanderlust. I'm not going to save a dime for tomorrow because, what if tomorrow doesn't come and I'm going to just travel? You have the fire movement, like we're going to totally sacrifice now and live in tiny homes with like no life in order to be able to just not work later, but earlier. Um, and I would say for the majority of my clients, we talk a lot about balance of like, you do need in your budget, in your cash flow plan, we need to build in travel, life now, experiences with your family, with your kids while you still have them. You only get 18 summers with your kids. So let's make them count. Let's not wait and build the bucket list for retirement. Let's hit the bucket list now, while also saying, if we're not preparing for the future, what if
Yeah.
the future does come? Like, it's pretty short sighted to say, I'm not going to do any preparing because I'm not guaranteed tomorrow. Like, you're not, but if you get there and you're not prepared, that's going to be problematic. So I would say most of my clients are somewhere in the middle. And because a lot of them are self employed and, you know, or realtors, there's a lot of flexibility to their life. And so we kind of talk through that. What are your goals? What would you do? Kind of the Kinder three questions. You know, you were diagnosed with, you know, terminal cancer. You've got 5 years to live. What are you going to do with your time? Okay, that was sped up to, you know, 1 year, or like maybe it's 1 week. I need to refresh myself on the questions, like a shorter time period. Okay, today's your last day. What would you regret having not done?
Yeah.
And kind of building their financial plan with some of those answers in place, because yeah, we want to be healthy, financially healthy, and I believe that that involves both long term and short term.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, like I think you struck the nail on the head as far as it's all about balance and basically understanding that the money is a tool. I mean, I think I've been guilty of this is that, I'm someone who loves the idea of like optimization, right? And like, let's grow your wealth, let's grow your net worth by optimizing things. But, sometimes the best use of the money is to use it today for something that again might not be the monetary maximization, but it's more like the utility it provides you to live a more balanced and meaningful life. Because yeah, at the end of the day, that's all we got is the time we have. Can't take it with
Mm.
you. So, um, but on that same note, I can imagine that you're dealing with some people, especially millennials, that have things like student loan debt. And how are you going about kind of having that balance of how are we paying down our student loan debt versus how are we investing versus how are we spending today? How are those conversations going?
Yeah, it none of these things are perfect. I wish there was like the bullet system. And so I think with my clients, we when we talk about their cash flow plan, like my younger, we're dealing with student loans, we're, you know, buying our first car. Like a lot of people in their 20s and even into their early 30s have negative net worths just because starting your life requires money that you don't have, so you finance it. Um and so we talk a lot about net worth. So, you know, what you own minus what you owe, assets minus liabilities, and increasing that. And when we're building out their initial cash flow, I'm a fan of the 50/30/20 principle of reverse budgeting. It's not like it's not the silver bullet. There's a million ways you could do it, but it says, you know, we want 50% of your take home money to go towards your fixed expenses. So rent or mortgage, car payments, like minimum consumer debt payments, um, utilities, cell phone, insurances, all the things that's like, we just know this is going to come every
Right.
month, right? Like we can put this on auto pay, put it on a carousel, and it's just going to like, bill comes in and gets paid. And we just know that that's that. But we don't want that to be more than 50% of your take home, because then we're not going to have enough assets to do other things. We want 20% to be your net worth building money. So whether that's saving and
Mm.
investing, whether that's putting extra money on your debt payments, on that minimum consumer debt payment, like more on your credit cards, more on your car, more on your student loans, we want to preserve 20% of your take home money to be used towards those things to grow your net worth. And then the remaining 30, that's your flex spending. That's your, you know, eating out, going on a trip, buying gifts for your family, the things that increase your quality of life. So we have 50% fixed, your I need this now to survive. 20% net worth building, we're building for your future, whether that's paying down debt or saving. Typically, it's a mixture of both. And we have 30% as your quality of life now money, because you're just not going to cook rice and beans at home every night. There's going to come a night where you're going to go out to eat because you're just exhausted, or you want a gym membership, or you want to go on a date with your spouse or your significant other. And we want to build that in. You need a life, you need lifestyle. And so
Absolutely.
we kind of work through that and figure out where are you now? Are you at 30% fixed? Are you at 60, 70% fixed? And then how do we kind of work that backwards? Um, I do tend to start with the 20, like what is that number? But oftentimes that will be restricted by the fixed. So we just kind of have to take an inventory of where you're at, then
Right.
prioritize your 20%, and then kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and I think people overlook, when it comes to any time you're increasing your net worth, right? So some people don't even know what net worth is, like you said, is assets minus liabilities, and anything that's you're reducing your liabilities, like your student loans, that's increasing your net worth, and so I love that when you're thinking about that 20% of, like, kinda like a personal savings rate, that you also are including debt repayment because hopefully, once you pay off that debt, then you can shift towards still maintaining that percentage and putting it towards more of an investment type. That's going to hopefully
Mhm.
compound for you as opposed to compound against you. So that makes a ton of sense to me. So my next thought is, when you're thinking about the net worth and you're thinking about, allocating towards needs and wants and personal savings, what are some of kind of the major risks that people tend to overlook? Because people, when I'm doing financial planning as well, everybody's focused on the accumulation side of things, but they're maybe not thinking about the risk side of things. So, what are some risks you're seeing? How are you addressing them? What should people be aware of?
It's a great question. I'm trying to think of like what would be specific. I think among millennials, or just the people I see, the risks that I see are just people taking unnecessary risk just to go after like the get rich quick scheme. And I know that's probably not new news, but like every few years there's the new hot topic and everyone just throws their money at it. And, a few years ago it was SPAC trading. Then, we've got crypto is a big one. And not that you can't make money on those things, and not that they're not worthy of like considering into a financial plan. We have lots of clients who have a percentage of their portfolio in cryptocurrencies. But I feel like people just go bullish on like the hot trend and take unnecessary risks. So sometimes when we're talking to people, it's like, all right, well, what's your goals? If your goal requires, you know, a long-term average of a 10% return, like your goal, your savings rate, all of that is going to require an expected return of 10%. Well, we don't need to put you in 100% Bitcoin where one year you might make 50% and the next year you're bottoming out. Like
Yeah.
what's the risk we need to take in order to achieve your goals? Whereas some people I think just like to take the highest risk because they think it's going to get them the highest return, and it's, get rich quick opportunity. And again, not that the opportunities fail, but like a
Right.
lot of them are short-sighted, and we have seen a lot, GameStop is a perfect example of it. People went bullish on GameStop. Some people made a ton of money. A lot of people lost a ton of money, by being bullish on that just because that was the hot topic and people were going for the get rich quick scheme. And I think that's one of the values of having a financial planner like yourself that says, let's look at your life. Let's look at, you specifically, Mr. and Mrs. Client. What do you care about? What do you value? What are your resources? And where's your life headed? And what's the best plan? Because if we don't have to risk losing all this money to get rich quick and we can get rich well instead, that might be a better opportunity for you. And maybe we have a fun money account where you're willing to risk it and like then have a cow. But I think the unnecessary or the unforeseen risks that I see people taking is that, and then I mean, in small business, I feel like people are just calling everything a tax deduction, and I feel like that's a risk if ever you get audited. I feel like people take the craziest tax deductions in their business, and I'm like, you can file that on your taxes, but if you got audited, that's going to be problematic.
Yeah, everything's a write-off. Yeah, people want their CPA to, like, go above and beyond maybe what they should be doing. as opposed to, a good CPA, in my opinion, is actually like following the letter of the law. Um, no, that makes a ton of sense. I feel like millennials in particular, feel like they're so behind the game, maybe because they did have student loans, or we don't have to go down that route as far as like kind of societal pressure, and also like the affordability of things, that they feel like they need to take these huge risks because they have no chance at kind of financial independence, and maybe they don't understand like compounding, and like you said, 8%, 10% expected return compounded over 30 years is actually a ton of money if you have a decent level of savings, if you're following that 20% savings. And so just educating people on kind of what this could look like if you follow a path of sustainability, as opposed to a path of seeking these like really high risk, you know speculative type investments. I was also thinking, just like in general too, as far as like transferring risk in sense of like insurance. So like maybe people
Mm.
are overlooking like the risk of like disability, or
Mhm.
you have dependents now, and how do you think about like protecting them before you've accumulated that nest egg?
Yeah, I totally agree with that specifically, especially with small business owners. Most people don't realize in the W-2 world that you have some level of life insurance, and most of the time some level of disability insurance. And I think people way underestimate the chance that that could happen, something like that could happen to them. And, when we don't consider that risk, we're really putting our family in a hard place. Not only if you pass away, obviously that's going to, especially if you're a breadwinner, that's going to be really painful for your family and your kids. They might have to not only grieve your loss, but liquidate the kids' college funds to like have to move or pay for the house. I've seen it happen. But I think disability is a huge one that people don't think about, because if I become disabled, not only is my family not getting income just as if I had passed away, but now they have to pay for me still. And I just became more expensive because of all the medical bills. And so
Right.
people really don't think about that. I have a friend in town, um, actually, who's a realtor, not a client, but just a realtor friend. He's in his mid to late 30s, was healthy, had family and kids, was playing soccer probably 2 months ago and had a heart attack or just cardiac arrest, and is alive but is not able to work, and is in really intense therapies working to get his memory and kind of his cognitive abilities back after this. And all the while, like, his family, luckily, I believe he had these policies in place, so his family's like, okay, we can take care of ourselves. But I just imagine if that wasn't the case, and now you're hit with all these insane medical bills and this, just the general stress on his wife and kids, it's just a really terrible place to be. And we think that will never happen to me. And I think the statistic is like it happens to 20% of people will experience some form of short-term disability in their lifetime, um, which is a pretty high statistic. Like 1 in 5 is
Yeah,
pretty
definitely.
intense. And so I think, like, building out, when we talk about building out benefits plans for our self-employed clients, that's a huge piece of it. Not just retirement, not just health insurance, the ones we think about, but life and disability are huge. And having an estate plan in place and all that goes along with that to make sure that your most valuable people are protected should something happen to you.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I just like to emphasize that and hear your thoughts, because I think as well, people, a lot of times they'll think about the life insurance. I think people are pretty aware of like term life insurance and like just getting the coverage you might need during your accumulation years, but they really don't think about the disability and what that could mean too, because there's all different types of what disability could mean, and how important, like you said, your income is your biggest asset. And then especially if you are self-employed small business owner, like you are the material involvement in your business and you're generating that. So these are just things to think about along the way, in addition to kind of the accumulation side of things. Um,
It's really well said.
so I appreciate you sharing that. So I guess on that same note, as just far as like balance, how would you recommend people just go about balancing work with family and personal life? I mean, you are somebody who is doing it as far as like, small business owner with family and personal life. So I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
It's it's a challenge. You kind of become self-employed thinking you're gonna have all this freedom, and then somehow you're working, like, longer, harder hours and getting paid less, and you're like, "What's going on here?" Um,
This is rigged.
I think I think keeping things in a healthy perspective, like, I talk to my clients about how, money has 2 values to it. The quantitative value, which says, $100 will buy you $100 worth of stuff, and the qualitative value, which says, what can you buy with $100 that will actually, like, benefit your life? And I think everything has that, like your relationships, your time, your health, your money. And so there's a tool that I use that's not like the end all be all, but it's just this little, like, success shifter PDF that I print out every month that kind of has, like, relationships, you know, personal well-being, professional goals, pipeline stuff, all the areas. And I can put in, like, what are the keys to a successful life? Date nights with my wife, intentional time with my kids, hanging out with other guys, just friends, you know, team meetings with my staff, like pipeline, like scheduling podcasts, meeting with clients, you name it,
Yeah.
exercising. I've got, like, one of them's like exercise X times per week. One of them's, drink so much water in a day. And then I just take an inventory, and it kind of just challenges me to be like, I haven't spent as much time with my kids. So I'm going to take off early and go hang out with my kids. And realizing, like, as a small business owner, you can get so sucked into your business. And then you're home and you're thinking about it and you're checking email on your phone, which I need to take off my phone in general. And it can become like this vacuum that can take you away when really it's a tool you created for yourself to benefit your life. And so I think it I read something recently that, like, the most disciplined people aren't actually really, like, disciplined. They're just have put structures in their life and systems to, like, force them to do things a certain way. And so
Yeah.
for me, that's this, PDF tool that just takes an inventory. It's time blocking to say, Tuesday mornings I go into work late because my wife has Bible study and I stay and hang out with my boys and get some, like, father son time, and then I go to the gym. And that's my Tuesday rhythm. My team knows it, everyone knows it. And sometimes just creating those time blocking systems will help. And the last thing I'll say on that is I think it requires an abundance mindset that a lot of people don't have. And I struggle with. I'm not perfect, but, you know, we think if I go in late to work every Tuesday morning is when the world's going to burn down and all my clients are going to leave me and I'm never going to get, the pipeline I want and all these things. And that's not the case. Like, we've studies have shown you can be just as productive in a 4-day work week as a 5-day work week. You can, Chick-fil-A is just as profitable and they're not open on Sundays. Like, you can draw boundaries. And I think that's just been a big thing for me, is trying to figure out how do I use all the tools in my life, my relationships, my health, my faith, my money, to my time, to really ultimately craft, like, a life plan, not just my financial plan, but how do I use that to kind of build out this whole life. So I don't know if that really answers your question,
No, it does.
but I think using forcing mechanisms like, PDF tools, time blocking, and trying to foster an abundance mindset. So if you're afraid that taking off time is going to ruin your business or you're going to miss out, just take the time and see what happens. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe your whole business fails and you're destitute under a bridge. Like, call me if that happens, but I'm pretty sure you're going to be fine.
That hits the nail on the head for me, because I've been going through this recently as well. Is just kind of auditing myself. I just do a simple kind of journal exercise. I read The Gap in the Gain. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dan
Mhm.
Sullivan. And
Great
just
book.
basically, yeah, great book. And just basically, like, journaling, my 3 wins for the day and then the 3 wins I want for tomorrow, and kinda just like, "Hey, as long as I accomplish these things, then I can walk away and kinda not have anxiety that I need to be doing more," because I think that's something that maybe, small business owners, like, always feel like they need to be doing more, and then setting those boundaries too, like checking email certain times a day, not or answering emails after a certain time of the day, meeting with clients only certain times a period. And at first you're worried, like, oh, is my business going to fall apart? But the truth is a lot of times people don't care as long as you are still providing, that value. And there's a lot of things that we think that we're providing value and it's not necessarily true. And then also,
Mhm.
yeah, just being intentional with the time and, when you determine that something's important to you, but then you don't act, with that, then you're gonna feel unhappy. So, like, if you say spending time with my family is important, then you don't make time to spend it, then you're going against what you said was important. So I love that. That's a great system to do
Mm.
as far as just having something that you can audit yourself. Um, so I love that. So I guess the last thing I love to ask people is just one tip or strategy that you would share with the audience for doing more with their money. It doesn't have to be monetary. It can be monetary if it's something that you want to share there, whatever you think.
Yeah, but before we hit record, you had posed this question, and I sort of already talked about one, which is just, you know, understanding if you can really wrap your mind around the fact that money is just a tool. It is just a resource to craft a good life. It's just one of the resources. We have other ones. I've said, family, relationships, time, health. There's all these resources we have that we can structure to fuel a good life. Money is just a tool. If you come to me, I tell people, if you come to me and more money is your goal, you're going to fire me because you're going to fire anybody. Because if more money is your goal, you'll never have enough. It's a psychological trick. But if you have a desired life in mind, we can use the resources to craft that. And you're going to enjoy your money more when you give it its rightful place that says this is just a tool in the toolbox. It's not the goal of life itself. Um, and a way that I've had people do that I've done myself, especially if you're a small business owner, is it's kind of part of the profit first mentality. Quarterly, treat yourself to something. Like if you are grinding in your business and you're putting a little bit of money away in the profit bucket, every quarter, go buy yourself like a new work bag or go you know, take your family out to eat. Do something with an abundance mentality that treats yourself so that you can see, like, I can use this money. I don't just need to hold on to it so tightly. Because that's what we're doing. We're just holding on to it for a rainy day. We're holding on to it so tightly with a scarcity mindset that it's not always going to be there. And then it's not being used rightfully to fuel our life. So I would say, like, foster an abundance mentality in your life by making sure you're realizing money is just a tool to be used now and later to build a life of purpose and joy.
Yeah, I love that so much, and I couldn't say it better. And that's something that I'm trying to challenge myself on as far as like that scarcity type mindset, because it comes from auditing your how you grew up with money, right? Maybe some of the things that our parents put onto
Totally.
us, and so I love that. I love that so much. So, well, I'm gonna put all your information in the show notes, but please, if there's one place that if people want to connect with you, what would that be?
Yeah, you can always go to my website. It's PeaceLink FP, so PeaceLinkFP.com. From there, you can, find my social media. You can find my podcast, all the places you can find me. And then I'm also on Instagram. Everything is PeaceLink FP. So Instagram's
Okay,
PeaceLink FP, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of the above.
awesome, great. Well, Leland, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise.
Thanks for having me, man. This has been great.